Welcome to your daily dose of dopamine. My name is Robert, and I'm here with Dr. Sarah Whittingham. Dr. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us. How are you today?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. And I came across the good news you recently got. You want to share with the group maybe a little about your history and what you're up to, what the exciting news is.
Yeah, so we'll start with the exciting news. I recently learned that I will be one of the patient members of the National Plan to End Parkinson's Advisory Council for the NIH.
So good.
So I'm excited for that opportunity to represent our community and hopefully fight for things that'll improve our lives and make our lives better over time. My history, I was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease in 2020 at the age of 46, so I'm about 5 years into this at this point. I'm a physician, anesthesiologist, and I really struggled the first year. I kind of pictured Parkinson's based upon what I had learned about it in medical school 20 years earlier, and pictured myself on a steep downward decline, like many
Right.
of us do.
Right.
And it took meeting other people who had been living well with this disease, and connecting with those people that made the difference. I learned more from the Parkinson's community and others living with this disease than I did from any medical textbook or any physician along the way. And so part of my mission now is to help try to share a lot of that both with the physician community to help us advocate to make those programs easier to get for people who may not have all the resources that perhaps I do, and also to help others with Parkinson's access those incredibly powerful tools that it took me over a year as a physician, somebody who has everything and should have known it, to come to terms with. And so I think there's a huge amount of room for improvement. So once I ended up, the thing that turned me around was actually enrolling in a research study at Cleveland Clinic. Jay Albert's study was studying the effects of cycling on the progression of Parkinson's disease. And I had pretty much stopped working out because I felt so horrible all the time. But I enrolled in his study. I started cycling. I started feeling better. My husband had signed up for a triathlon, which was still 6 months away, and I secretly signed up for it and started training. And I really surprised myself. Got back into running and back into swimming, which is something I had done 10 years earlier. I'd always been kind of an athlete, but I'd kind of given that up, thinking that was all over with Parkinson's.
Mm.
But I ended up surpassing all of my expectations with that triathlon. I even beat my husband, which was pretty awesome. Uh, and ended up qualifying for the half Ironman World Championship race. Following that, I was watching the story of, I always watch the Ironman documentary every year. So Ironman Kona is like the Super Bowl of Ironman. It's a big deal.
Mhm.
And each year they make a documentary and they feature the story of an athlete who's had a challenging road to get there. And in 2023, they featured the story of Chris Nikic, who's the first person with Down syndrome to finish a full Ironman. And I saw his story and what a huge impact he and his story had on the Down syndrome community, helping people believe that they really could accomplish what nobody thought possible. And so, I kind of had the thought, I was like, I wonder if my story could help the Parkinson's community in a similar way. And so I wrote Ironman and I told them my story. And this was like January of 2023. And I didn't hear anything at all for like 8 months. And then 9 weeks before the race, I get a phone call offering me a slot to compete at Kona, which was like 9 weeks away, which is not enough time to train for an Ironman. Fortunately, I had been training for the Columbus Marathon at the time, which is the same weekend. So it kind of all somehow worked out. And I realized this was a once in a lifetime opportunity to do this race and to hopefully bring awareness. And so, as part of that, my story was shared a lot of media outlets. I was on the Today Show, Women's Health Magazine. My story was the one featured, or one of the main ones featured in the Ironman documentary for the 2023 Ironman. And so I really kind of was an opportunity to share all of that and gave me some opportunities to speak. And I've always been kind of an introvert, so I never kind of pictured myself as being somebody who would be a very outspoken advocate, somebody who would go speak to people. But I really enjoy it because I feel there's a lot that needs to be said. And I feel like my background and my story kind of helps people realize that, just with Parkinson's, your life isn't over. It's different. And there's so many things. And I mean, our community is unbelievable. I've just met so many incredible people that have helped me along the way. And I hope to be able to do the same. So that was kind
Well, what an
of
incredible setting of the table. Thank you for all of that. One of the things I heard you say was, this road from being a doctor to being diagnosed and what you knew of it from a medical standpoint and, presumed based on what you saw versus what you felt. And several times it sounds like you had to go back and forth between I thought this was over and then I had to relearn this and you had to do things differently. And then also I think from the person with Parkinson's, or the care partner's perspective, listening to this and going, but wait a minute, she's a doctor. How did she not know XYZ? And to me, the comeback always is because none of us do,
Not
right?
even most doctors don't know that. In fact, I mean, I had doctors, even recently say, what, you're running? You shouldn't be running. You might fall, right?
Right? And you're like, wait, you're a doctor, right? In
But I mean,
2026.
but this whole exercise thing, it's actually very recent, shockingly so. And
Right.
so, but the more I see and the more I learn, I mean, it's so, so important. And one thing that I have written a book, and so I've done a lot of thinking about all of this. And one thing that kind of came to mind was, when somebody has a stroke, it's a medical emergency, and it's a similar concept. Brain cells are dying, but they're a medical emergency. They're inpatient in a hospital, and they get all the resources up front. So everybody comes to them. They have a social worker, mental health workers, aggressive physical therapy, aggressive rehab. Everything that they need at the time of diagnosis comes to them because it's an emergency. Parkinson's, because it is such a slow progressing disease and it's not an emergency at the time of diagnosis, none of that is an urgent thing, but then none of it ends up happening. And so what happens is people get diagnosed, usually in a short appointment. Maybe the doctor says, it's not as bad as you think or whatever, but nobody hears that because they're freaking out. And then their next appointment may not be for 3 months. And so then they go home and start looking on the internet and see the worst of everything and hold on to that. And it becomes this downward spiral. And I think our system needs to do better as far as setting people up with social work appointment, social workers, connecting with the Parkinson's community that can help guide these people from day one and get people moving because by the time we're diagnosed, over 50% of the dopamine producing cells in our brains have already died, which means there's a huge amount of work that we can do to improve balance. Right now, our medical system doesn't worry about somebody falling until they've already fallen and broken something. They don't get physical therapy, they don't do anything until something bad has already happened. We should be working on that from the time of diagnosis, working on balance and teaching people to fall, like karate type exercises, teaching people like, how to get down and back up
Yes.
but people are afraid to study these things. Oh, somebody might get hurt. I'm like, well, they're obviously, this whole, and it's safe for medical legally for a doctor to say, don't do this, because if they don't do anything, then they're not liable. And, right. But, if somebody goes and runs a marathon and has a heart attack, then okay. But it's so frustrating to me to see that so much could be done for much less money than we're spending on reacting to the bad parts of what happens down the road. And so I think, I have a lot of ideas of what I think needs to be done from a policy standpoint, and I'm just kind of listening and learning right now. But I think that is a big part of it is helping people and 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 the there may not be the evidence needed to warrant, the aggressive rehab right now, and having Medicare and insurance companies pay for that because right now people are exercising. A lot of times they're doing it out of pocket on their own time, and whereas, the way I look at it, and I have a lot to say about this, but I look as exercise is our treatment. I mean, as the best treatment for our disease. Somebody has cancer, their treatment is chemotherapy, and they get a half a day off work to go get their medical treatment, and they get paid for, that treatment is paid for. Somebody with Parkinson's, our treatment is to go exercise, every day, and maybe an hour or two a day, or, and so I feel like from a policy standpoint, we could keep people in the workforce much, much longer and being productive members of the workforce if we encourage people and make that a priority to get people exercising and say, okay, you have Parkinson's. It's important that you exercise. Here is whatever, 3 hours a week designated off work. And we'll make sure that you get this time and go exercise. And not everybody may want to go exercise, and that's their choice. But I think, for a lot of people who don't have the time and resources, that's something that will make them feel better. It'll keep them in the workforce longer from a financial standpoint. It's better for everybody. And it's just frustrating that it's not looked at that way. And it's, because there's and I, it's because there's not a lot of money to be made on that, right? So like
Right.
if there were a drug that did all of these things, and
Right.
a pill you could give somebody that did all of these amazing things that exercise did, and pharmaceutical companies were lobbying to pay for that medication because they're going to make millions of dollars, then that would get paid for. But exercise, like it's you can't patent exercise, you can't like charge for it, and so it's there's a lot of gray area of things that we can do, I think, to improve our lives in a way that is meaningful and brings people together and I just yeah. So I have a lot of ideas and probably more ideas than bandwidth I tend to have, but
I'm with you, and I hear you completely. You're in the right place. You're talking to the right person. I
preaching to the
feel.
choir. Huh?
Yeah. Well, and about exercise, a deep passion of mine before Parkinson's, and now even more so, of course, knowing that it's medicinal value, like you say. That word gets thrown out there, and there's a lot of attitudes. I did my master's study was on the media side of things, and the guy I studied was Jack LaLanne. Do you happen to know historically who he is?
I don't
He's
know.
considered kind of the godfather of exercise from a media standpoint in the country. He had a show in the 1950s on TV, ran for 37 years, I believe. He was wearing, the jumpsuit. He had like the dog next to him. And of all things, I mean, first of all, the doctors at the time thought he was nuts, right? Exercise. No, when you get your 30s, you should be, relaxing, having a cigarette. Remember, I mean, these were the actual attitudes. And heretically, he was telling women they should exercise. Women, oh my God, in the 1950s, because he's on during the afternoon, right?
Right.
And so he, was well before, kind of the 1970s boom of exercise and where the Jane Fondas and Richard Simmons and Schwarzeneggers and other came
Yeah.
in. And, there's this idea of what exercise is and then what it does for us. And that's where I think it definitely needs parsing and more conversation because I haven't done an iron, but I've done a marathon before, so I know a little about endurance training. And when you start training at that level, or say like our friend Jimmy Choi, the training he does, right, which is outstanding, it doesn't just take, as you know, a half hour a day. It
Hmm.
takes longer. And this I know begins to stretch the difficulty and the bandwidth for people. So, that's I think part of the conversation because there are progressive companies that do offer exercise as part of their workday, knowing the for everybody, not just the
Right.
Parkinson's community,
Absolutely.
because it's not just physical, of course, it's mental too. And you mentioned being goal oriented. Yeah, when you have a race out there, something, it's going to not just put you in the I'm moving my body because I say to, but it's going to direct a result because as you know from J. Albert studies, if you're just on the bike spinning, you're probably not getting the results. You have to be at a certain speed over a certain period of time to get the results,
Right.
right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this is where exercise needs unpacking and not flattening as a word. It's kind of, in one sense, it's duh research. We've known it forever. It's good for us. But we don't quite talk about, I think, the intricacies and the way it needs to be done in order to get the benefit. Because some people say, well, I exercise. And it's like, let's break that down a little bit. What does that actually mean, right?
Right.
Because, especially if we're talking about reaching the neurological levels of benefit for people with Parkinson's, and Jay studies are right at the front of that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you make a good point too. I mean, with exercise, it's not, people tend to have their type of exercise that they like to do. But from a neuroplasticity standpoint, I'm a huge advocate that we need to be doing a lot of different types of exercise and constantly mixing it up to challenge our brains to make those new pathways. Because if the only thing you're doing is riding the bike, that's great, and you're going to get really good at riding the bike, and that those pathways will be, in top notch. But your balance, it's not going to probably not going to do much for your balance, not going to do much for your flexibility, in your core strength and all of the other things. And so I think it's really important to, do some sort of circuit training or something where you're doing always mixing it up and challenging your brain in new and different ways. And I think, by bringing people together to exercise, you end up with that social connection part of it too. I mean, In Motion, which is this amazing community center in
Mhm.
Cleveland, people keep they work people hard there, but the reason people keep coming back is for the social connection. They don't come back because they love to exercise. They come back to see their buddies, and they know that their buddy's going to give them a hard time if they don't show up. And it's the social part of it that keeps people coming back. But the social part is just as important too, because we know that social connection and people isolation can worsen the symptoms and become a downward spiral. So there's so many benefits of bringing people together to exercise in a positive environment, and I think that's what we really need to work towards, nationwide, here to make that accessible to people.
I'm 100% with you. Again, same type of thing. I don't know if are you familiar with improvisation as a practice or an art form?
A little bit, not really, but
No, no worries. So the basic philosophy of it is two words, yes and, right? Acceptance of
oh,
an
okay,
offer and building on top of that, right? It's
right.
played in theater games and people know it for comedic purposes, which is wonderful. My work in Yes and Exercise, my nonprofit, is kind of blending exercise principles with yes and exercise, yes and improv games, right? So that students get there, and much like you were saying, they get the variety, they get the challenges, and hugely, like you said, they get the social acceptance, right? To
Mhm.
bring any challenging emotion, frustration, whatever, to the plate and work it out. I mean, people show up constantly telling us, I feel like crap. I almost didn't come today. And we're like, you're in the right place. We're going to yes and that. We're not going to try to say you don't have that. No, you feel terrible. Awesome. Let's play with that. And they, right away, they're like, oh my God, what do you mean? It's like, no, no, no. That when we deny those things emotionally, we keep ourselves socially from others, right? We
Mhm.
start to distance. And that's where, like you said, isolation just craters the
Right.
Parkinson's community in particular. One thing I'm very proud of is that people, they use my class sometimes as a social warm up to get to class that they might be worried about going to, right?
Mhm.
They'll get there, they'll get fired up, they're ready to go, and now it's like, now I got to go to my rock steady. Now I got to go to my pedaling for Parkinson's, whatever. And it's like, yeah, because
That's awesome.
getting out the door, even if you're experienced, don't you have those? I know when I was
Oh,
training for a
totally.
marathon, it's like
That's
people
the
say, "Oh,
hardest
well,
part.
it must be easy." I'm like, "No, you know what? The first mile and a half, I'm like, this sucks. I hate this. I'm going to quit."
Yeah.
Even when I'm really in good shape, it's just
Yeah.
part of the process, right?
Yeah, no, I absolutely. And so, yeah, that's one thing my book I really go into is are strategies to overcome all of this. And so, one thing I learned was that looking for the positive in anything, and there's always something positive to find. And so my friend Sema, who's a world-class CrossFit athlete and coach, she was taking a class on how to coach mental toughness like way before I was diagnosed, and she used me as a guinea pig. But one thing she had me do was write down lists in my phone of everything I could possibly like about each type of exercise that I did and make it as ridiculous as possible. So in my phone, I had swimming and feeling this water go under my swim cap when I first get in the water and like all the things that I was like, oh, that I kind of like that. And even if it's totally ridiculous, or you're feeling myself glide through the water so that when it's time to get out of bed to go swimming, I'm thinking about what's on my list. Like every time I think, oh, this sucks, I go back to my list. Or when I'm swimming and like, oh, I'm looking forward to the warm shower afterwards, or I'm going to stop at Starbucks on the way home. And, I think of, the good things associated with that activity. And so when it is hard to get out get out the door or to keep going, to keep your mind focused on what's positive about that activity because it's so easy once you start focusing on the negative that takes hold and it's a downward spiral. So you need to learn to make that irrelevant, to put it out of your mind and focus and redirect your energy to what's positive in that moment. And so I think in everything that we do, you can always find something positive. And I look at the time that you spend dwelling on the negative is time you're just
Mhm.
flushing down the energy you're flushing down the toilet because that's not helping you
No,
worrying about all those things in any way. You
yeah,
might as well put your energy into what you can do and go from there. So I
I
think
love it.
strategies like that. Another strategy I talk about, which I think is kind of interesting, is the peak end rule. When you have an experience that what you remember when you look back on that experience is almost entirely how that experience ended. And so like when you like think about like watching your favorite team play football, if they're losing the entire game and you're miserable the entire afternoon and like not having fun at all, and then they win at the end, the next day you look back at that, oh, that was the best game ever. That was so fun. I love watching that game. Even though you're completely miserable for 3 hours,
Yeah,
and they win
yeah.
at the end. Or, a marathon, for example, you're miserable the whole time, but you remember crossing the finish line and getting the medal. And so that is an enjoyable experience to people. And so that's why people sign up for them again, even though, and so when you exercise, find a way to end in a positive way.
Yeah.
An example I use is when we lived in Utah, we lived at the top of a really big hill. So anytime we went for a run or bike ride, I had to finish coming up this big hill. And so at the end, I would always like, why do I do this to myself? This sucks. Like, and so it got harder and harder to get out the door. And so one day I was like, forget this. I'm going to drive down to the bottom of the hill and run the same loop. And now I'm finishing going downhill. And it was before I even knew about this psychological phenomenon, but and it worked. The last mile, I'd be going fast, smooth, and I was like, wow, that was a lot of fun. And the next day I was like, let's do that again. And so I think, when you plan exercise or plan activities, try to find a way to end in a positive way, whether, it's a cheer at the end of class or, getting together with coffee with your friends after class and end the experience in a way that makes you want to come back tomorrow because that's what you'll remember when it's time to walk out the door. So
I
I think
love
there's
what
a
you
lot of
said.
strategies.
Yeah, primacy recency in media theory works the same way, right? I mean, storytelling, you go to a movie, starts really great. You're like, what the heck am I watching? But I'm going to hang in there, and then it ends great. And you're like, oh, and that's all you cared about, right? The act
Right,
two might have
exactly.
sucked, but so those things psychologically, like you say, carry the moment. And the idea too of what you said about changing the route, changing, the parameters. So many times we get locked into saying, well, this sucks because that's the way it has to be. And it's like, well, says who? I mean, you can drive down the hill, you can change your loop, you can change the crowd you're running with, you can change the exercise. And two, what you're talking about, writing the positives. I don't think enough people understand the power of writing. We certainly don't read as much as we used to. I don't think we write as much as we used to. But that practice of literally etching onto our brains, right? Especially if we write longhand,
Yep.
it just, those things we reinforce. It's like mantras. Oh
Hmm.
yeah, that's there too. Instead of the running quick to whatever it is, our lizard brain or other side, the panic piece, the protective piece that says, this is going to suck. I'm going to hate this. I'm going to be cold. I'm going to be miserable. It's like, well, and I get my coffee, and I get the water running under my cap. So it's
Right,
like they're both true, and
right,
and you gravitate here without denying that. Yeah, yeah,
right,
that's part of it, and this too, and
right.
you get a bigger experience.
Yeah, no, I think there's so many, strategies that we can help people to get through a lot of these hurdles that people have. And I think another big hurdle people have is like, oh, I have Parkinson's, I can't do that, or I'm old, I can't do that, or I'm too old,
Right.
I've never been an athlete, I can't do that. And so another activity I talk about in my book is make I call it the rock star list. Make a list of every accomplishment you can think of that you've accomplished in your entire life. And even make it an ongoing list. So you're always thinking of yourself of like, wow, I did this, wow, I did that. And I use some examples of like even the most ridiculous ones, write them down. Like, I beat the GPS estimated time by 3 minutes on my last road trip. I was like, yay me. Or I got the produce bag open on the first try last time was trying to open the produce bag. Like focus on every little victory and write it down again, right? Because you realize that wow, really are capable. You've had an entire life of accomplishments, and this is just one more hurdle that there's no reason that you can't overcome, the challenges that it presents. And so, I think getting people to think of themselves as people who are doers and not making excuses for themselves of why they can't do it, instead of saying, wow, look at, I've already done all of these things. I can fight Parkinson's. There's no reason I can't go for a walk today or go climb that hill or do whatever. And so I think getting people past that mindset of, oh, poor me, I have Parkinson's, or I can't do this because of I'm Parkinson's, or because I'm old, or because whatever. There's always a way to find a way to move, no matter
Absolutely.
how advanced you are. I mean, there's chair yoga classes, there's cool aerobics. I mean, there's always a way to move, no matter what your circumstances. And sometimes, like you said, it may require a little creativity, but go for it.
Well, and there's a bugaboo word, creativity. You mentioned some people, a lot of them I deal with because my modalities are improvisation and storytelling. They're on the
Yeah.
psychosocial creative side. There are a number of people who opt out or don't ever consider opting in because they say I'm not creative, and that's part of my campaign is just to tell people you were born of creation. You are therefore creative, and no matter what you were told, experienced, however you were traumatized along the way, or measured against other people's creativity, it doesn't mean you don't have it. Not everything that is creative needs to be published and sold for $1 million in order to be successful, right?
Right.
Creativity can be the way you do an exercise, can be the way you open a bag, can be the way you produce a meal, the way you converse with a friend, and something else you said I loved too, which was not only that every victory counts, but the things that might seem absurd. I adore absurdity. When
Right.
we embrace absurdity, because life really truly is absurd,
Right.
when we embrace absurdity and taking, great, maybe oversized pleasure in something like opening the bag or something, that laughter, like you're doing right
Right.
there,
Exactly. I was like, hey, me, like
right? And
celebrating in the
that's
middle of the grocery store. I was like, yeah. So,
it sticks, right?
right.
Laughter
No.
sticks, and
Right.
and now we're moving, right?
Right. No, absolutely. So I think, helping, that mindset. And, I think, I say it all the time, but, it's it's all gratitude is the foundation of all of it is finding gratitude. And there's always something to be grateful for. And, like, again, creativity plays a role in this too. And some days you may need to be more creative. I use the example, like, on days that are rough, I'm like, well, at least I have chocolate milk in my refrigerator when I get home, or at least my dogs still love me when everything else seems to be going wrong. Like, there's always something to be creative or creative too, but to be grateful for. And, I love Michael J. Fox's quote, that gratitude makes optimism sustainable. I think, that's absolutely true. And something that we all could work for, like everybody, not just people with Parkinson's, but I think a lot of this stuff applies to everybody as we age.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and having teenagers in my house, it's not just as we age, but I guess when they age too. But boy, the end of the world is all the time around the corner for them, and
Right. Yeah,
we
no, absolutely.
keep trying to tell them it's like that wonderful campaign years ago. It gets better, right? That idea of opening people up to what you're going through and feeling that might seem life ending. I mean, talk about a crisis, right?
Right.
It does get better, and this fits the hero's journey very much where we write from, which is we often the best stories, the ones we really embrace, have to do with the highest stakes, the things that seem most impossible, the things that couldn't possibly turn well, and they did, and they do all the time. But like you said, we don't give ourselves credit for those moments when they do. We just think,
Yeah.
oh, that's how it was supposed to be. It's like, no, the odds were stacked against that in every way possible.
No,
Um,
absolutely. Yeah. No, 100%. And I think, in a lot of way, I would say Parkinson's gives us an opportunity to be heroic because,
mm,
to people who may not have Parkinson's, who don't exercise, if you can encourage them to exercise with you, there's like, oh wow, she's got Parkinson's and she's running this 5K. What's my excuse? And now you
right.
become a hero to others, which helps you to stay motivated as well. And so I think when you start thinking of yourself in that heroic way, and there's a lot of things that we can do to be heroic as people with Parkinson's. Another big one that I'm hugely advocate for is talking about our mental health struggles because society as a whole, everybody, everywhere, people don't talk about what they're struggling with mental health wise, or that they're talking to a counselor, taking medications. And so a lot of people suffer in silence and don't get the support that they need. And I think by people talking about that, saying, I've had depression and I'm taking medication for it and I'm talking to somebody and it's helping, that gives somebody else permission to talk about it too and to seek help. And so I think in that way, it's an opportunity for us to be heroic too, because we do know that Parkinson's, does put us at higher risk of depression, because of, the changes that happen in our brain, and that we do benefit. A lot of us do benefit from taking medications to help with that. And I think sharing that, even with people without Parkinson's, helps break that stigma of mental health issues in our whole society. Because I think, somebody gets cancer or breaks a bone, everybody's close to, at their side, encouraging them. But too often people with mental health problems suffer in silence because their family is embarrassed to talk about it. They're embarrassed to talk about it. And I think this is another huge opportunity for our community to make a difference too, around the world.
Well, and like you said, people just don't understand Parkinson's generally. This is one of my big calling cards right now, and it's just to say, people say it's just tremors or you look fine,
Yeah.
those types of things, and those become their story and the limitations and the stigma that gets attached to the person, and then people can become performative rather than full human beings being like, I better be my best self because people said I look good. Like I've heard people talk
Right.
about that going to the doctor's office. I'm going to
Yeah.
show them my best today. And it's like the doctor goes, yeah, you look great. And then they walk out and they fall apart. And it's like,
Right.
you gotta, but being vulnerable is hard, right?
It
Even
is.
in front of a doctor, it's
Yeah.
hard
Yeah.
because, I think there's admitting that
Hmm.
it's this tough. And then if I admit that, does that mean it's over? Does that mean I'm completely screwed? When, like you said, actually, no, admitting a low point can lead us to a new high point that we hadn't ever imagined was possible. But we have to admit the low point first.
Right. No, absolutely. 100%. 100%. Yeah. So I think just getting people to feel comfortable talking about that. And I was super fortunate in that my employer was very supportive from day one. And I was very open with my diagnosis at work. I'm an anesthesiologist. So I was very concerned that in some way my condition would, impact patient safety. And so I was very open with all my colleagues, from day one. Like if I ever think that I'm unsafe in any way, tell me because I don't want to work past that point. And I finally, this past June, said I'm done. I just the stress and I just because I was having a difficult time keeping track of a lot of different things,
Yeah.
and my colleagues were like, "What? You're totally fine. You're doing great." Like, but they didn't see that like I was double and triple checking every single thing, and I was so stressed that I would get home from work and completely pass out and not do anything else because I was so exhausted from double checking and triple checking because I was afraid I was going to forget something.
Yeah.
So it was time. But yeah, they were like, "What?" So I'm glad that I went out on my terms and, and it was able to do that. But, and
Well,
so,
you worked an extraordinarily high stakes job that for those of us who have had the benefit of getting anesthesia for something like, say, a colonoscopy, get our happiest 20 minutes of sometimes the year.
yeah, exactly.
Best sleep I've had in a long time. I want to focus on your book for a minute. I brought it up. I don't know if you saw it. I want to put it
Yeah.
forward. Let's talk about that. Go to the website and we'll make sure to leave the link for people. Here it is. Oh crap, it's Parkinson's, which I love the title. And Oh Crap Media, which is a great website. So walk me through this. If there's anything you want me to highlight, what do you want people to take away from this?
So basically this is the guide I wish I had when I had been diagnosed. And it starts with that oh crap moment when we learn of our diagnosis and it kind of goes through helping people deal with the stages of grief. I think if you scroll down a little bit, it has the 9 different sections.
Okay.
But the first section is like coming to terms with the diagnosis, the stages of grief. And
Hmm.
then I talk about setting outrageous goals, trying to get your mind thinking in a positive direction instead of decline. And so don't let Parkinson's edit those. Think of the most outrageous thing you could possibly want to do. And even if it's totally impossible, that's okay. The next is, talking about our care partners and how this affects them. Care partner grief is a real thing and the stress of them. The section 4 talks about telling people. And I like to think about when we talk to people about our diagnosis, not to present it as bad news, but present it as a way that you're building a team of allies, people that are going to be support you. Let them know how they can help you because I thought a lot of times people are unhappy with the way people that somebody may react to the diagnosis, but I think we need to be proactive and say this is what you can do to help me and this is what I'm going through. It's real. This is what I need to do and this is how you can help and to be open about that and build your team of allies as you tell people about your diagnosis. And also, some people decide to keep the diagnosis a secret. And I talk about that too, about the risks of isolation and how that can build walls around us. And it's something to consider. The next one is just about, the Parkinson's. I talk about, that diagram of decline and how I have my updated version of a different progression pathway for Parkinson's. The next one just goes into the basic, medicine and tools and talking about the social prescriptions for health. So the things that your doctor may not talk about. And so the wellness pillars such as sleep, nutrition, mindset, I forget, exercise, I forget, there was a bunch, but
Yeah.
going into all of those and learning to become, to learn how to, organize that and learn from others. I say, you're the scientist of your life and you're going to have to figure out what your symptoms are and figure out, learn from others how others are managing those. Some of those tricks may work for you, some may not. And you just get to trial and error. And the benefit is, when you figure out something that works, you get to feel better.
Yeah.
And then the last part is just, keeping it up for the long haul. And so my goal is just to help people, see this in a positive way, maybe a little bit of humor in there.
Yeah.
You see all these pictures of the dog. That's
Witchy.
Twitchy McGrit. So my thought with that was that, you know, nobody wants to see pictures of old men exercising, and older people don't want to see pictures of younger people. They, because there's like, oh, that's not me. I can't relate to them. And so Twitchy looks like none of us, but so that he can represent all of us, I say. He's based off my dog, who's now almost 14, and her legs don't work, and she gets up and she follows me everywhere I go. And you can probably hear her barking because I left her in in the other room because she's unhappy I left her. But she can, she pulls herself around and keeps getting up and keeps trying because, I mean, she's a dog who goes places and does things, and nobody told her that she's sick. And so how would we be if we didn't know we were sick and we just
Right.
wanted to be people who go places and do things? We just happen to have Parkinson's and happen to have another set of challenges. And so that's kind of how Twitchy came to be. And I just, I hope that he becomes a motto for, to help reduce the stigma of Parkinson's, that we can say, I can see myself in Twitchy. Some days I'm, flat on my face. People, nobody can get me to go. And other days, I'm upgoing. But, I think we need to really work to help change the stigma of Parkinson's within our society too, because it puts a lot of limitations on people, especially in their careers. So,
Well, your perspective on this is so unique and so privileged in so many ways, having both the medical training and the inside of a person with Parkinson's, that I can't say enough about how grateful I am that you are putting your story out there at this level, that you are sharing at the level you are, that you seem just on fire about this, which I
I'm very
love.
passionate about that.
Oh, I love it. We need more advocacy at that level, not quiet advocacy, but like you said, that you didn't even think of yourself as a speaker, and boy, you're explosive. You're
No,
wonderful. You're going to the World Parkinson's Congress here in a couple
I
months.
will. Yes, I will be there. I've got
I'll
three
see you
abstracts,
there.
and I'm going to bring 500 copies of my book to try to get out into the world. And so, yeah, I will. Yeah, I hope to be able to get that message out because I think there's so many. I mean, there's so many things that we can do better for our community. And I've had the best of everything. I've had super fortunate in every way, and I realize that. But I'm hoping to be able to help other people find their way too, and find their community that can help them get better.
Well, and again, back to where we started. Here you are on the patient board, right? With for the nation's capital. Will that mean, are you going to travel there every so often? Do you know the parameters of that yet, or?
I don't really know all the parameters. I know that we're supposed to meet at least quarterly and give an annual report to the Secretary of Health and Human Services.
Great.
I know there's 10 people on the council who are voting members. So those are the non-government people like myself, and then 13 government members, like from the NIH and Medicare, probably, I don't know, VA, all those, agencies too. I guess who serve an advisory role. So I'm still trying to, I've only gotten the letter and sent it back. I haven't really heard much else yet. But I'm definitely going to be doing a lot of listening to others as far as what other people think needs to happen, and try to figure out a strategy to do that, because I'm hoping that this council can have some impact. I know a lot of people worked really hard to get this national plan through Parkinson's through Congress, and it's been very disappointing that seems like nothing's really happened yet. And so I'm hoping that we can make that worthwhile for all those people who put all those hours and hours in to get that through.
Will you do me a favor as you can? Will you come back? Can we schedule
Absolutely.
again and give me
Absolutely.
updates? Because I'd love to share without the community, what I know, some things you may and some things you may not be able to share, but whatever you can, because like you
Absolutely.
said, the feelings about we did this thing and then it sat for 2 years of silence, and thankfully there was the big movement there at the, November or so. We're all saying, where's the plan? And I don't know if that helped, but it seemed to, give some sort of movement.
Yeah.
And now, you and others are on the board. So let's keep talking about this.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that would be good. Yeah, and I open to input if people want to try to get a hold of me. I think I don't know if my email address is on the website. If not, I'll go put it on there.
Yeah.
To connect with me if they have things that are concerned to them that and obviously I can't tackle every single problem. I'm gonna even though all my ideas, I'm gonna have to pare it down to what I think is going to be the most impactful, because I'd rather make one or two big differences than try 20 things and not get anywhere with any of them. So.
Totally
So
get it.
yeah, so thank you so much for your time and for having me, and nice to meet you. And yeah, it's
Great to meet you, and how exciting. I'll see you in a couple of months at the World
yes,
Park
I will
Congress.
see you in Phoenix.
I hope if you have time, my documentary is going to be showing there, and we'll talk more about
Oh,
that
good.
offline.
Yeah, I
But
did see about that. Yeah, they're very good. Yeah, I will definitely connect with you there. That's
and
awesome.
and
It's
and
good
we'll be
talking to my
talking
book.
more about your book too.
Yeah,
I'll
I
be
will
helping
get
you
that to
promote that.
you. Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
All right, this is a daily dose. Be well, everybody.